Hello, protocols, packets, and programs. Welcome to the historic Application Security Theater here in downtown Devington. As a reminder, please silence any devices in top 10 lists. Note that this venue has several exits. In the event of emergency, just keep shifting left until you reach one. In tonight's cast, the role of Eliza will be played by ChatGPT. The role of Fido2 will be played by 20 slides of phishing awareness. Please be aware that C and C++ will be used during this performance. Patrons with sensitivities can go. Thank you and enjoy the show. Which means this week we chat with Niv Braun in a sponsored interview about the nuances of securing an SDLC for AI and why the pipeline is different from securing your API. Dim the lights and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show to learn the latest tools and techniques to understand DevOps, applications, and the cloud. Your trusted source for the latest Appsec news. It's time for Application Security Weekly.
AI is transforming applications, but with innovation comes new risks. Enter Noma, the first application security platform built to secure the entire data and AI lifecycle. From your AI supply chain to models and runtime, Noma protects it all. With a single platform that integrates seamlessly across your data pipelines, Jupyter Notebooks, ML Ops tools, code, and application SDKs, Noma delivers full lifecycle visibility, security, and compliance. Start securing your data and AI lifecycle at securityweekly.com/Noma. This is episode 315, recorded January 27th, 2025. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with John Kinsella. Hello, John. Good to see you.
Still 2025. It's great to see you, Mike.
Still 20. I think it's still January, too, but we'll see what can happen. We have with us, however, in January 2025, Niv, who is the CEO of Noma Security, a startup tackling security, governance, and compliance across the entire data and AI lifecycle. Prior to founding Noma Security, Niv honed his skills as a security manager in Unit 8200 in the IDF, where he collaborated with top experts in the intersection of security and AI. He went on to lead the security products business at Verint. He's a core member of OWASP AI Exchange and a contributor to public policy and community frameworks. Hello, Niv. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Mike. Happy to be here.
We're glad to have you here, and we're talking about AI and securing the SDLC. And right off the top, I do have to ask, why this? Why is this special and not just AI as software and we have to secure the normal software development lifecycle?
Yeah, great question. I think that eventually we see that we have three main fundamental changes between the classic SDLC to our AI lifecycle. The first one is the people and processes. The data scientists, the data engineers, the data analysts, the MLOps guys, they work differently. It's not in vain that we have not only DevOps, but we have MLOps. Like, it's truly practically different processes that they run. And they work differently. The second is all the supply chain and the infrastructure. They use different open source, like open source models from Hugging Face. They use different building tools, like all the data pipelines and model registries and the AI platforms like Databricks and Domino and Snowflake. They don't even use the classic building tools. And the third is also the technology itself that is being built by these guys. All the models and the AI models, because they are different technology, they are statistical and not deterministic, they also cause new kind of risk, like all the different adversarial attacks around the AI that we hear all the time, like prompt injection, model jailbreak, model denial of service, model denial of wallet, etc. So eventually, when we look on this basic three foundations of life cycle of people and processes, building tools, and the technology, and we see major differences on each one, we see that the same principles of securing software should be also implemented here, but the implementation itself is just totally different.
I'm glad I asked. You gave us a long list. We only have about 30 minutes, so we'll see if we can address each of those. But that was helpful to break them into three. I'm actually going to do something different and go into the middle part, perhaps, and talk a little bit about the people, the personas of using this, because you mentioned ML teams, and genAI is new and fancy for the last year or two, but ML kind of has been around a while. And you're pointing out that these are data scientists working with the data. And we can't just say, and I think to your point, we can't just say, well, use this fake data or use this small bit of data. You actually, they actually need the real world data, possibly even the sensitive data for their processes, right? So what does that introduce? How is that introducing maybe just more attention to the need for data security? What does that look like?
Sure. So I'll take what you said and I'll divide it to two. First, I totally agree that the problem that we have today is not only genAI proper. I think that what we see from all the different also companies that we work with and the big enterprises and the Fortune 500, everybody that we work with at Noma, we see that now the genAI wave and all the attention that it pulled, it's kind of took the security team and to put the spotlight on the data and AI people and the processes, and then to understand, the problem that we have is much, much more basic and much wider than genAI only. genAI now is very important and we see the great adoption of it. But the classic machine learning and data science, as you said, it's here for years now, but we don't check any basic of misconfigurations of their tools and their code and anything that they build. And I think that now also we see that the attackers also now their attention is through all this data science and AI tools, and we see a lot of attacks for the first time also going through these processes and tools. Now I think that one of the most interesting and most important topics around this area is exactly like you said, the fact that the building process itself, unlike the classic software developer, already involved sensitive data. So it means that now we need to do three things. If in the past we called it shift left and we have secure the right, so now we need to secure the right. We need to secure all the runtime AI models that we have in our production. We want to try also to shift left if we can prevent already some of this risk in efficient way on the left side, on the building side is great. Now we also need to protect the left, because the left itself is sensitive. There are a lot of sensitive data involved during the building process, during the training processes, etc. All the building tools like Jupyter Notebooks and Databricks and the data pipelines, all this rest of the tools already on the development side involve sensitive data, and this is why the risk on the building side of the classic of the data science processes and the MLOps processes is even higher than in classic development.
And that points out, too, that Appsec can't just go and say, you're dealing with sensitive data, encrypt it, like we would suggest for other ways, because you can't train or operate or test on encrypted data. You need to decrypt it at 100%. Some point. So does this mean then that Appsec does need to have, obviously, I think the answer here is obviously, yes, it needs to have a different sense of how to work with this, but what does this look like for maybe an Appsec resume? Are we looking at new skills that people need to be now not just programming experts, but maybe data scientists as well for Appsec? What does a resume look like is the question I'm trying to get out here.
Yeah, for sure. So actually, I think it's super interesting to see where the market goes. I can tell that we already see first AI security practitioners in relatively more mature enterprises and mature organizations. I don't believe that it's going to be very common in 2025. I believe that the trend goes this way. What I believe that we need to do in 2025, and I think that not for any new technology we need to invent new roles. What I think is that we need to try as an industry to build this common language between the data and the AI teams and the product security team. I think that during the last decade we did great job in building all this common language between the developers and the Appsec. And I think that now we truly see in the field that these two different new kind of groups between the data science and the MLOps and the product security try for the first time to understand each other and to build these common terms in order to be able to collaborate. Then, later on, I believe that we'll also see more it will be much more common to see AI practitioners, AI security practitioners. I don't think that organization, in order to try to start to tackle this area, they already need to have dedicated AI practitioners start from day one.
And to add to that, I kind of want to guess that you mentioned, for example, Jupyter Notebooks. hopefully orgs already have like a cloud security team or some team that understands these are the ways to have the paved roads, the secure, the guardrails, other types of metaphors for just saying this is how the data, these resources can be controlled. They have privilege, they have restricted access, data can't leak. So again, I'm mostly just trying to reinforce your point that this doesn't necessarily seem different in terms of concerns that an AppSec team might have or the security team might have. So I want to go back to that idea of trying to tease out what are the areas here that are AI related versus AI specific, in the sense that because we have genAI, because we have this ML data, we've got to do something new and different. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that angle from like red teaming or some of the vulnerabilities that this potentially introduces, because you mentioned that in I think that was number 3 of your list that we started off with.
Yeah. You already know me very well, and you know that this is how I love to divide it to AI related and AI specific. I believe that in the AI related area, the principles, of course, are even more similar to classic software lifecycle, and it covers all these different kinds of misconfiguration and scanning the code and stuff like that. We just see that all the classic cloud security and AppSec tools, they just don't cover these specific areas. So we want them to cover it. We want our cloud security to cover also all our misconfigurations in Databricks. And we want our AppSec tools to scan all our Jupyter notebooks. And we want our CI/CD tools to check the misconfigured, not only CI/CD, but also data pipelines and MLOps tools. We want it we want them. They're not there. There are so many stuff to do that are just not there. So we can wait a couple or 2-3 more years until they cover it, and then we'll be okay. The attackers don't wait. So I think that the AI related is very important because it's just different stack. It's not only cloud. It's self-managed. It's SaaS. It's cloud. It's all over the place. But still, I believe that it is AI related. In addition to that, we have also, exactly like you said, the AI specific. The AI specific can be on both. It can be on the pre-runtime, it can be on the runtime. On the pre-runtime, it might be that we have the different open source models that in order to be able to scan open source model, it's not classic AppSec. You need to understand the heuristics of models to know how to check for biases in weights, stuff like that. It's really different area. And in addition, you have also the attacks, the adversarial attacks around AI specific, all different OSP 10 LLM, for example. Let's take prompt injection or model denial of wallet, very two popular attacks that we see today. And there as well, it's totally different expertise, of course, that I think that most people today think automatically about going to the runtime only. I think that there are two different approaches that organizations should combine together when they start to build their AI security framework, which is first, exactly like we said, on the runtime itself, make sure that you scan all the prompts, all the responses, you have the right guardrails around the different topics and off topics that you have there, secure mask the sensitive data, etc. But in addition, we can also check all these different kind of adversarial attacks on the pre-runtime side. We don't need to wait only to the runtime only. We can also do, for example, AI red teaming. That if you ask me also on the previous question about specific persona, this is persona that we see actually increasing even becoming even more popular in organizations. We see a lot of AI red teaming experts that are starting to check all the internal AI applications and the external one inside the mature enterprises.
One of the things that that I've seen with red teams do well is that they go through and look for, call it the crown jewels, or they take a prioritize where are areas of deep risk across our org, and then they'll go and exercise, do we have controls? Can we defend against that great risk? They're not, for example, going around and just doing some crusty XSS, generic reflected XSS that might show up in a bug bounty. And where I'm going with this, you mentioned, for example, the OWASP top 10 for LLMs. It's got prompt injections, data poisoning, a lot of other types of attacks. I'm curious, is there a way that you would recommend prioritizing those? For example, I asked a question, I'm going to keep talking. This is filibuster right here. This is prompt injection. It feels to me that's kind of the cross-site scripting of the LLM age. It's a lot more about trivia rather than consequences. And data poisoning, even not everybody seems to be training their own models. So I'm curious what you've seen, especially since you've got far more experience docking with these organizations than I do.
Yeah, no, actually, I love this note. Last week, I hosted a webinar together with Reed, the previous security executive in Merck that we work together. About we call it the webinar we call it cutting through the noise AI security. I think that there are so many risks that are sorry, but totally BS. That we live the FUD movement around AI, and I truly believe that organizations should secure what matters. This is why I also speak a lot about AI related risk and AI supply chain risk, because this is even if it's more boring and we expect, as we said, the existing tools to cover it, etc. This is where we see most of the attacks comes today. So I think that the open source models and the misconfigurations in Databricks and all these different kind of attacks, these are the main way that we see today in the field. In addition, I will include also the actual the prompt injection and the model jailbreak. We do see a lot of these kinds of attacks. Now I will divide it to two. I think that we have when you talk about prompt injection attack, for example, you have the manipulation way, let's call it, and you have the impact. The manipulation way is actually what is the technique that I'm using in order to manipulate the model, and then the impact is what it caused. I think that today what we see is that we see a lot of manipulations attack, but because organizations are not yet widely connect all these models to wide sensitive data, and we don't yet see a lot of agents in production with a high privilege and access internally in the application. So we see that the impact for now of these kinds of attacks is relatively low. I believe that we will see, and we also see it with with some of our more advanced customers that are already working with agents in production and stuff like that. That the risk is going to be exponential higher in very shortly, once we start to connect all these models. And I do agree 100%, and I repeat it every time, the example that you said about data poisoning. I think that this is exactly something that is very sexy to talk about, and super interesting and unique and innovate and stuff like that. Practically in the field, you almost don't see at all these kinds of attacks, because exactly like you say, organization, even if they fine-tune their models, they most times don't do it with just external data. They do it on their own data. And then the other example of data poisoning is people that say, yeah, but if the attacker already got to your database and then they can poison it, I would say that if the attacker already gets to your database and your sensitive data, the last thing that they want to do is to start to poison it, to manipulate your they will just take the data. So I think there are a lot of topics that are totally FUD, and that the organization should truly focus on secure what matters.
You're reminding me of if we think back, say 5-10 years, I used to work with a few different startups that were trying to do something in the data security space. Either, how do you categorize massive amounts of data, encryption, masking, all these sort of things we've talked about. But at least what we saw back at that point in time with the startups I was working with, it's hard to get a customer to actually spend the budget on that, right? They know they've got this data, they know they've got a problem, but if it's stored in say S3 or some sort of public cloud, just going through and reading all that stuff to be able to gather the information to classify, it's we're already talking large budgets. So I'm wondering what's different this time, and as we're talking through this, what OpenAI keep talking says $100 million to train their model. I'm guessing the percentage that they spend on security is very tiny compared to that. But for an average company out there that's trying to do this and get into the space, are they? And I know I'm pitching this question to you as a startup founder, but are they spending on it, or do they realize that there's a problem here this time? Are they looking at it differently, or how do you see from out in public?
From do you mean from the model providers, or you mean also the different users of OpenAI and all the different organizations that embed genAI and AI in general, if they are aware of the risk and if they truly invest money in it?
Yeah, the latter is.
latter,
I appreciate the filtering, but yeah. So those who are consuming, not just the end users of ChatGPT, but those who are trying to build products around this.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, actually, like I think that specifically around LLMs, because the entry barrier also like for the attacker is relatively like very low, so everybody actually understands the risk. Like even if you are not like hacker or you are not like cybersecurity like person, like everyone that knows English basically understand the security risk that we have there, and we actually see in this case that like the R&D side are like so aware of the risk that most times they even put kind of like the limitations of deploying these kinds of models into production before they have the right mitigation. And that's amazing. I can tell you that like for us, what we see is that most times the data and the AI teams are the one that like push us like very hard inside the organization because they want just like to decrease the time to production. And they understand that until they have the right like controls and guardrails around the models in production, like they cannot do it because the risk is like too high. So they truly like want like to push different like products as part of their building process and as part of their runtime as well. So they will like feel comfortable enough truly to deploy it into production. So we see like great awareness.
Related to that, because you've been mentioning risk quite a few times, AppSec often is either responsible or maybe not accountable. We won't pull out our official RACI matrix here, but dealing with, as I mentioned, the bug bounty, dealing with the classic OWASP top 10 in the sense of SQL injection, cross-site scripting, blah, blah, blah. We could go through the boring part rather than the sexy and innovative parts, as you've been describing. But if we talk about the genAI, and you were already just now talking about like the data science team being aware of the risks, is the AppSec team still responsible here, or how are the risks related to using the genAI? How is that expanding, or how are orgs paying attention to that in terms of who's responsible?
Yeah.
Or even just paying attention?
So I think that like in this case we don't see in the philosophy we don't see like great differences between this and classic application. We see two types of organizations. The first type is organization that believe that like the AppSec are like the they are like the responsible person like department for everything that we have like in the risk, and that the R&D side is their colleagues in order to make sure that we truly meet the policies that they define. And then most times they also like consume like all the different like tools and like open the tickets for the R&D, etc. The other type that I think that we see also like in the industry in general, kind of like momentum like towards this philosophy, is that the R&D, they are like the owners of the application, so they also like are the owner of the risk and like to meet like the policy. The AppSec just like sets the general policy, and the R&D should like meet it. And then they actually also like consume like the different like tools and like work with like the security tools in order to make sure that everything is done according to the policy. I see today in the market both types, and in like I haven't seen like an organization yet that was like a difference between how they run the classic AppSec program to the AI program. Again, different tools and like different principles, like a lot of like differences between them, but I haven't seen a like data science team that is responsible for the risk, and their colleagues like the R&D, they put it like on the AppSec team.
And I wonder then too, because you mentioned agents, so let's throw in RAG in here too. That does feel like a classic AppSec kind of problem. Here is just an API talking to another API that's potentially exposing customer data or sensitive data, et cetera. How does this look like for an AppSec team to approach when AI is involved here? Because it's RAG. Is this meaningfully different? Let's go back to that AI related versus AI specific that you've been talking about.
Yeah. No, so in this case, I truly believe that like it's AI specific, not AI related, because model, as we said, is statistical and not deterministic. So you can never truly 100% trust the output that the model like will take like that will have. Now, because of that, as long as you should use like the model as kind of like external user. Now, as long as it's completely isolated, so okay, like you have like kind of like external user that works with external users. But once you start like to connect this model, which is again, we act it as external user, to internal applications, to like providing it also like higher privilege and higher access. So it likes give it like to external user. Now you wouldn't like give any like write permissions on your database to any like external user that, again, you cannot trust. Like it's not deterministic, and you wouldn't like give it like to run code and like anything like that. So I think that like we should be like much more careful here. I believe that like the runtime piece in this area is going to be like very important to control and to guard all the different like prompts and the responses between the user and the agents, and also like between the agents and the internal tools that we give it access to. And in addition, I believe that we'll also have a much more important posture management around least privilege between these agents and the tools that they have access to. Something that today, again, because this is really like innovative yet in the market. We work with several enterprises that already deployed agents in production with relatively even like high privilege. But I would say that it's really like the minority of the organizations that we see for now in the field. So I believe that like the real breaches are still like around the corner. Once we'll start like to see it much more frequently.
That to me feels, excuse me, a little more like the classic AppSec of something going in over an API, and maybe not necessarily an API, but there's a remote agent type thing at some sort of central server, sort of standard what we've seen over the last few years. Loosely, bear with me. But where I want to go with it is, I'm curious, are you seeing folks, it seems like that's relatively cheap to secure at that point, right? You're securing an agent. Are you seeing anyone try to consider security in the actual training codes? In other words, when they're running through all that data, building up these models, are they actually thinking about putting, I'll say, guards in at that time?
Yeah.
And the reason I ask that again is I'm stuck on cost today. I don't know why, but like for every tiny thing you do there from a security point of view, right? It's going to slow down the training. It's also going to make it more expensive. So that's what I'm sort of, do they think about it, or is that not worth the effort?
100%. And like I'll surprise you. Like sometimes if you add like security, it can even like make your training even like shorter, because we see today that sometimes because the AppSec team, they understand that they don't have any visibility and governance to what happens in this training, and like the different like as we said like Jupyter notebooks and like the open source models and stuff like that, they just disallow, like they just like give like over restrictions to the data scientists to work, unlike to the classic software developers. For example, we see a lot of time that they like disallow them to use Hugging Face models because they understand that it's risky and like they don't have like anything that like will be able like to secure it. But once they understand that they can like start using these tools, so it actually kind of like make like the development and the training much more efficient. In addition, I'll take like Mike's example. We saw a lot of different organizations at the beginning. They told to their data scientists, you have to work with synthetic data and fake data and stuff like that. And then to be able to get to the right results took the data scientist much more time. But once you are able like to tell them, hey, you have now like the governance. You can work like directly like with the real data. In case we see any violations, for example, we see that the PHI is now trained on models against policy, we will alert it. So now actually you enable the data teams to work directly with the data itself, and you shorten, like you make like the training to be much more efficient. So we see actually a lot of time that, again, the data scientists, because they receive like the over restriction, they push these kinds of tools in order to improve the efficiency of the working because of security. And I think this is what security, like good security, is all about. Bad security is about further restrictions. Good security is building a common language between the building side, like the R&D or like the data science and the AI teams in this case, and the security team, and to actually take off different restrictions and to enable the business like to run faster.
Yeah, well, that quote, basically, you just saved us the rest of the year of recording, because that's basically what we should boil down AppSec into. So we're just going to replay that for the next several months, Niv. Thank you. A lot of this, though, has been very much a focus on securing the genAI for a product. And maybe, part of where John's question was going made me think of one final question I want to squeeze in here is, have you seen the AppSec teams or security teams finding value out of genAI, using genAI as a security tool? In other words, some sort of feedback loop to identify this is PHI or checking for other security controls, et cetera, versus just this is the LLM that's being used for the company's product, if you will.
Yeah, you mean like not only security for AI, but also AI for security?
Yeah. Once again, you put it succinctly, so we're going to just repeat that for the next couple of weeks too. Thank you.
For sure. So yeah, I think that AI for security is amazing. I think that in general, not only in the security industry, but specifically in the security industry, we're still looking to the right use cases of like where to use AI. I think that a lot of time we just see abuse, that like people want to say that they use AI, so they put AI in places that like it's not even like in the most efficient way like to solve the problem. And I think that we need to look at like real problems and real solutions, and not just to abuse cool technology. But I do think that we, like 100%, we have like a great use cases that AI can be a great usage of. I can tell you also like that in Noma, some of our models of like detection and like guardrailing different like agents and AI application, we also use different models. It's not only LLMs, it's also like a small language. Like we have like a lot of different models, but I think that we see like amazing usage of it. I believe that we'll also start to see like a bit farther ahead, also that kind of like AI SOC analyst and like a bit more like automations around the area of like incident response and stuff like that. I believe we still have some time until we get to the level of let's say credibility of these bot agents that we want to start like to give the reins inside the organization. But I believe we'll see like this kind of trend in a couple of years.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to steal credibility and value, or how I'd summarize that in my own 3 words. And at the end here, Niv, one of the things we ask all of our guests is to share their view of AppSec, their description of AppSec in 3 words. And with no other rules, I'm curious how you would respond to that.
Cool. So I'll continue with the same mindset that I talked about like 2 minutes ago. So I'll say enablement. I will say efficiency and collaboration.
Perfect. So 2 E's and a C. I love it. Niv, you've given us a wonderful message about avoiding a lot of the FUD around AI and finding value and finding what's new and different. So I very much appreciate that. And we'll find a link to that webinar too, just so people can hear more about what you've been talking about in this area. Thank you very much for joining us.
Perfect. Thank you very much, guys.
I want to say thank you to John as well. To learn more about Noma Security, visit securityweekly.com/Noma. And with that, we'll take a quick break and return with news of the week.